Ekchuku Jepumano.
Yes, it's under.
That's the name. Ekchuku Jepumano.
Yes, that's right.
Maar is dat ook ja? Ik snap het niet. The LSA. Happy to present. We have 3 panelists. Then each one will introduce themselves, please, because they didn't send us any biographies. So if you could introduce yourselves, that would be great. Your affiliation and everything. So the first speaker is going to be Itamar Dubinsky, presenting on the Giants Encounter, Basketball Academies and Sports Diplomacy in Africa. The second presenter is Ikechukwu Ejekwomadụ, and he is from the University of Tübingen. And he's presenting a paper called Boys to Men, Life After the Unsuccessful Aspires Sporting Career. And finally, we have Sakiru Abiona Yusuf from the Center for Black Cultural and International Understanding and Ben-Gurion University of the Negev that he forgot to write down. And he will be presenting a paper. So it's okay, we'll forgive him. And he will be presenting a paper called More Than a Livelihood: Enrolling Children in Sports Academies in Nigeria. So everyone will have 20 minutes. We're giving you a little extra time because there are only 3 panelists, and then we'll open up to questions. So please, Itamar is first.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Should we move the speaker over to you? The microphone, should we move it to over there? I think that's the microphone, yeah?
Yeah.
So can you hear me? Ikechukwu or Gal Busui?
Yes, I can again.
Oh,
I can
great.
now. Yeah.
Excellent, Ikechukwu. Great to hear you again. So yeah, I'll start from the beginning. So my name is Dr. Itamar Dubinsky, and I'm a lecturer at the African Studies Department at the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And my research focuses on sports and development in Africa. So let's begin. First of all, I just want to say thank you for CQ for organizing this panel, this important panel, and also for our host at the Lagos Studies Association. So let's begin. Cameroonian-born Joel Embiid and Nigerian descent Giannis Antetokounmpo, Masai Ujiri, and the Ugumike sisters are just a few examples of professionals who were born in Africa or brought to African parents and have won individual and team honor in the NBA and WNBA in the last few years. Is it possible to do like full screen, or is it possible to do on the full screen the slides? If not, no. Yeah, the power. Yeah.
On the bottom there. No, on the pouch. Yeah, but it's not sharing. Share it. Yeah. Down on the bottom there, the red, see the red? No, keep going.
Here we
Yeah,
go.
Yes, like that.
Wonderful.
Excellent.
Excellent. So these achievements were also recognized by the management of the NBA, who in 2018 inaugurated the NBA Africa project with the establishment of a basketball academy in Senegal, and in 2021 with the launch of BAL, the Basketball Africa League. My paper today will examine the goals of the NBA endeavors in Africa, as well as the political, cultural, and economic impacts these endeavors have had so far. Because this research is still in its infancy, I will mostly provide questions rather than answers. However, one argument I wish to make is that we should consider the NBA Africa project as part of a broader American effort to increase its influence in Africa. In the wake of the prominent role China is playing in the continent, each country utilizes its own comparative advantage and appeal compared to the other, with China harnessing its vast economic and industrial influence in Africa, while the US is harnessing its cultural and social links in the continent. To analyze the NBA project, I will first lay a concise historical overview of the US policy in post-colonial Africa. Then I will tie the American aspirations to return to Africa with the NBA project through a short discussion on the term sports diplomacy, and then through the analysis of the NBA project. And given that this is a work in very preliminary stages, I would be grateful for any constructive critiques you might have. So historians maintain that throughout the second half of the 20th century, sub-Saharan Africa has not been very significant to the American global interest. During the Cold War, the United States only assisted some African regimes through financial and arms aid to curb Soviet influences. After the Cold War ended, Africa's importance further declined. Maybe we can move a slide. When the US did intervene in Africa, the results were not once damaging. During the 1980s, the Washington-based institutions that formulated and promoted the structural adjustment programs further harmed African economies. During the early 1990s, the US also failed with its military interventions, as seen in Somalia, or lack of, as demonstrated during the Rwandan genocide. The early 2000s mainly saw the US involved in Africa in policies that reflected the country's post-September 11 war and terror. The US economic links with African countries at the time were lagging behind China, which since the early 1990s began increasing its influence in the continent. The increased presence of China in Africa and growing trade relations engendered grave concerns among US diplomats. We can move the slide. Throughout the Bush, Obama, Trump administrations, high-ranking policymakers labeled China's growing influence in Africa as, I quote, immoral, selfish, and neo-colonial, unlike a presumed American benevolent approach. These anxieties were further fueled by the construction of a Chinese army base in Djibouti, which signaled China's expansion in the continent beyond mere economic interest. Consequently, the US began attaching more importance to Africa. As Conte Morgan argued, the extensive presence of China in Africa, along with US concerns over the new strategic threat, has made the African continent, once considered non-strategic, now central in the geostrategic rivalry of the two largest economic powers in the world. Similar rhetoric was expressed during the recent visit of current Vice President Kamala Harris held to Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia. John Kirby, White House national security spokesperson, said about the trip that African leaders are beginning to realize that China is not really their friend. China's interests in the region are purely selfish as opposed to the United States. We are truly committed to trying to help our African friends deal with a spate of challenges. In the wake of these concerns over China, the US initiated several policies aimed at tackling China's prominence in the continent, including in sports. We can move a few slides forward. Now, we can move, yeah, excellent. Yeah, the one further. One before. So sports scholars who began examining the American sports diplomacy in Africa often frame these efforts through the prism of sports diplomacy. This term builds upon a growing recognition among 21st century political scientists concerning the diversity of the diplomatic arena. As Hawking argued, within this multi-stakeholder diplomacy, networks of state and non-state actors coexist and intersect with one another, so much so that public, private, and third sector actors, quote, become producer of diplomatic outcomes. These non-governmental diplomats come from various fields, including sports. International sports relations scholar Stuart Murray defines sports diplomacy as the conscious, strategic use of sports people and sporting events by state and non-state actors to engage, inform, and create a favorable image among foreign publics and organizations to shape their perceptions in a way that is more conducive to the sending group's goals. This definition reflects the notion that the state does not have a monopoly over diplomatic affairs, and that such affairs extend to the cultural realms of sports. Murray offers 4 categories through which it is possible to distinguish the different articulations of sports diplomacy in the modern era. The first, as you can see, traditional sports diplomacy, refers to the usage of sports by states to realize diplomatic goals. The global popularity of sports enables governments to reach wide publics by hosting events and disseminating the state political ideology. For example, the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, which promoted the country's Rainbow Nation vision. The popularity of sports also becomes a tool to pressurize regimes, as we've seen with apartheid South Africa and the sports boycott. The second category Murray offers is that of new sports diplomacy. It refers to the collaborations between state and non-state actors in promoting official policies of sports diplomacy. The third category, sports as diplomacy, relates to non-state sporting actors that display diplomatic characteristics and qualities. International sports bodies engage in diplomatic practices such as negotiations with governments to achieve their objectives. The fourth category, sports anti-diplomacy, refers to abuses by sports by nations, non-state actors, and athletes. Such practices include cheating, violence, and actions that deliberately increase frictions. While not always positive, these 4 categories attest to the potential of sports in assisting nations in mediating estrangements and realizing their international policies. How do these qualities manifest in the American sports diplomacy in Africa? What benefits do Americans gain from the NBA Africa project? What categories out of these 4 are embodied in the NBA Africa project? These questions have so far not been quite analyzed, and so my research seeks to fill this gap to better understand what the US gains from utilizing the NBA as a diplomatic tool in Africa, as well as the NBA's Africa's impact on African communities. So the current day American decision to promote basketball in Africa builds on foundations that were laid since the mid-20th century. In 1959, the US State Department sponsored NBA star Bill Russell's tour of West Africa. Since the mid-1980s, African basketballers began playing a more prominent part in the NBA, like Hakeem Olajuwon from Nigeria. In 1993, the NBA commissioner held its first official visit to the continent, visiting Nelson Mandela. And in 2003, the NBA opened its Basketball Without Borders humanitarian project in South Africa. Building upon these sporadic initiatives, the NBA Africa project emerged in 2018. The NBA opened in Senegal an elite basketball training center known as the NBA Academy. This academy serves as the primary training and study location for African prospects, males and females. 3 years later, the NBA launched BAL. This first of its kind yearly competition brings together the best teams of the continent while giving a stage to the NBA Academy players to showcase their talents. We can move one slide. The NBA Africa project attests to the fluidity of modern day diplomatic sphere, which is no longer limited to official state representatives. The NBA is not owned by the US government, but is a consortium owned by the league's co-owners. Yet the NBA project is supported by the US government and former influential policymakers. And the most famous representative is former President Obama, who serves as a strategic partner and a minority owner. He consistently tweets about the NBA Africa project, tying it with his passion to the game. In a BAL summit that convened last year, in which Obama attended, his rhetoric reiterated additional possible development rewards, noting that I really believe that what the NBA is doing in Africa will make a substantial difference beyond just getting more people involved in the game. In Africa, basketball also has the power to promote opportunity and wellness and equality across the continent. Scholars have pointed out the contribution of the former president, noting that while Obama's role in the NBA is not directly linked to the US diplomatic efforts, his presence serves as a type of informal diplomacy in a region where the US has struggled to sustain a constant positive diplomatic role. The links between the NBA and the public sector extend to current day state people as well. These have pointed to the social, cultural, and economic goals of the NBA project. The US State Department spokesperson reiterated that the American Sports Diplomacy Division has a long-standing history with the African continent, using our shared love of basketball to promote solidarity and friendship between our people. The expansion of the NBA into Africa only further serves to connect us socially and economically through the game of basketball. We can move one slide further. Alongside the goal to strengthen the American friendship with Africans, the US State Department spokesperson refers to economic interests, which are indeed crucial to the NBA Africa project. The NBA's engagement in Africa is meant to expand the league's brand to new global markets that would purchase the league's broadcasting rights, sell its merchandise, and increase the stream of talented African players to American universities and from there to the NBA. All of these outcomes are meant to increase the attractiveness of the league and eventually financially reward the owners of the NBA. NBA Africa CEO, as well as the NBA's Deputy Commissioner and Chief Operating Officer, reiterated the importance of the economic goals by saying we stated that sport could be used there in Africa as a platform to not only improve the health and wellness of one of the world's youngest and fastest growing population, but also create a whole new industry around the business of sports. Alongside the rhetoric about social, cultural, and economic development, the NBA project attached environmental purposes to its endeavors. The NBA has launched a Trees for Trees initiative aimed at supporting the planting of trees across the Sahel. For each three-pointer scored in a Basketball Africa League game and in any team practice sessions, the NBA has committed to planting 3 trees. Furthermore, every time fans engage with him on social media, if you do like, retweets, or whatever, a tree is planted. As for the African perspective about the economic, social, and cultural contribution to the NBA, this is a topic that requires much further examination. Dr. Lindsey Krasnoff interviewed several current and former American players, coaches, and administrators, before that, Some of them have been involved in the NBA Africa project, and the transcript of these interviews are available online, which could be handy for researchers exploring the topic. Yet these insights are limited to practitioners rather than players, families, and other people affected by the NBA Africa project. Beyond Krasnoff's work, researchers mainly depend on 2 sources, publications circulated by the NBA and newspapers articles. The problem with the first is that they only present a rosy image of the NBA's project, of the benefits that its academy graduates who enroll in American universities on scholarships as student athletes gain. The problem with the second kind of sources is that the reporters receive restricted and supervised access to the NBA project. Naively, I thought that I could succeed where others have not, I've corresponded and spoken with several NBA Africa people, but so far did not gain access to the NBA Academy. And there were a few other restrictions and problems so far. Yet. Maybe in a few hours they will be resolved. Given these restrictions, there have been very few scholars and news reporters to analyze the NBA Africa project from critical perspectives. Michael Goldman and Jeffrey Potter published a chapter on the NBA's partnership with Rwanda, which hosted the inaugural BAL tournament. The two scholars analyzed the American interest in cooperating with an authoritarian regime. Their article serves as a very important and critical contribution to the understanding of how basketball is used for diplomatic goals, as well as the similarities between the US and Chinese engagement in Africa, despite American rhetoric on the promotion of democratic values in the continent in contrast to the Chinese. To date, only one critical news piece on the migration of Africans to the US who seek to make it as basketballers in the NBA uncovered problematic dynamics. It's a 60-minute report. These include trafficking and exploitation by dishonest American intermediators of the dreams of those youngsters who seek to improve their and their families' lives through success on the pitch. Such negative consequences lead me to another main argument I wish to make, not in this lecture, but hopefully in an article, that such negative consequences attest to the anti-diplomacy potential of sports, which could jeopardize the American goal of utilizing basketball as a bridge to Africa that will tackle China's expanding influence. Using soft power means to gain soft power can actually backfire, as Branagan and Giulianotti wrote in regards to Qatar hosting the 2022 World Cup. There is a soft power, soft disempowerment nexus in which states risk a loss of attractiveness or credibility due to unforeseen contingencies and unintended outcomes. So to conclude, the goals attached to the NBA Africa project sound promising and important, yet they require further research. Does the project indeed contribute to the social and economic links between US and Africa? Does the project promote, in Obama's words, opportunity and wellness and equality on the continent? Does it contribute to the global expansion of the NBA brand? Does the planting of trees contribute to the environmental to the environment, or is it a token gesture in a very polluting industry? Each of the 30 teams in the NBA covers 70,000 kilometers each season in flying to games. Whereas the NBA and its supporters, including former President Obama, are praiseful of the organization's endeavors in Africa, we currently lack critical insights into its impact among Africans and in the US. So further research must analyze the diplomatic merits of the American sports diplomacy in Africa, their impact among African states, and whether and how Africans are shaping these policies to their own needs. So as I said in the beginning of my lecture, any criticism will be most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tamar. Excellent presentation, fascinating. I'm looking forward to more research on that. Our second presenter is on Zoom. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. So you go for it, you have 20 minutes.
Okay, how do I share my screen?
We need our tech person. You can just share.
My slide and the screen.
It says you can share. I don't know. Can you try?
I can't hear you clearly.
Chico, can you try share your screen? I think you have the access to it now.
Okay. I'm coming. Yeah, more. Okay, share screen. Yeah. Presentation. Yeah, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, maybe you want to do full screen.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank
Okay.
you. Maybe
Okay,
very
thank you.
slightly farther if you can.
Yeah, happy to have you here to listen to my presentation. My name is Dr. Ikechukwu Ejekumado. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute of Sports Science at Chaos University, Tübingen, Germany. My research revolves around football and society in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly football migration and aspiring athletes. And my presentation is on my ongoing project, which is the presentation is today is titled Boys to Men, Life After the Unsuccessful Aspired Sporting Career. The summary of my project is that the project examines experiences of former aspiring professional athletes years after ending their quest to achieve professional status or overseas migration through football. And it aims to understand how they live the impacts of the unsuccessful aspired career, as well as the process through which they reimagine and renegotiate a new course of life. So within Africa, particularly in the west of Africa, thousands of youths, thousands of youths have the imagination and the aspiration to achieve social mobility through football. And a lot of it emanates from a lot of forces at macro level and also micro level. Macro level in that dwindling opportunities for the youth to actually make a living within the neoliberal economy, and also the influence of African footballers who have succeeded overseas. So, is someone talking to me?
No, we have some interference from the room on the end. It's the next room, if you could believe. But we hear you and no one's talking to you. It's just somebody in the other room talking very loudly.
Okay, so I was a bit of maybe if someone is trying to say something to me.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so as a result of the success also of African players in Europe, a lot of youth in Africa have the hope that they can also make a life, a future out of football, like those who have succeeded. And as a result, there's a growth of football academies and amateur football clubs all over Africa. And unfortunately, within many of these clubs and academies, there's an absence of a sort of dual career planning. In certain cases, you have youth who have abandoned education or all other apprenticeship that could also prepare them for adulthood. And unfortunately, many of these youths would not succeed with their attempt to go professional or to migrate through football, which leads to what Carlin and Darby call involuntary mobility. That's the difference between that desire to go professional and achieve migration and the realization of that dream. So my project looks at those who experience that involuntary mobility. How does that continue to affect their lives years after they would have abandoned that dream to pursue a different course of life? Okay, so my guiding research question is, how does the aspired career shape the lived experiences of ex-youth trainees and athletes after their pursuit of a professional career in football or migration through football? The research aims, there are 3 research aims which I pursue in this project. The first is to explore the experiences arising from the aspired career that continue to be lived by ex-youth trainees and athletes after their pursuit of a professional career in football or migration through football. The second aim is to understand how ex-youth trainees and athletes repair and restore coherence to their disrupted identities and emerging biographical narratives. And the third is to articulate interventions or policy measures that may promote alternative and dual career pathways at youth academies and amateur football clubs. And at the moment, I would focus this presentation on the first two research aims, because that's the aims that I have already done some work on currently. The theoretical framework that guides my project, the theoretical concepts of biographical disruption and biographical repair. Bio talks about significant events that alter the individual's life path, usually with negative consequences. So I conceive deselection and as a biographical disruption to the dream of professional, achieving professional status or migration through football. Any athlete who fails to achieve that dream has experienced a form of biographical disruption, because the athlete's biographical narrative is less around achieving professional status and migration through football. The second concept is biographical repair. Biographical repair are attempts by an individual to develop capacities to cope with and manage the challenges of an altered life world. So after deselection, athletes who fail to achieve that dream have to live a different course of life. So biographical repair involves that process through which ex-youth athletes try to reimagine a new world and a new course of life. Our methods. Epistemologically, my project is based on social constructivism, which argues that individuals make their own knowledge of reality through their experiences. Who are the participants? Ex-youth athletes and those who work with them. At the moment, I have interviewed 8 former youth athletes in Nigeria and 1 coach and academy proprietor as well. And they were purposely selected across Nigeria, different towns in Nigeria, about 3 different locations. And current data I have collected was collected through face-to-face interviews between March and April 2023. So what are my preliminary findings? First of all, what are the experiences which I conceive as the challenges that ex-youth athletes live with after this pursuit? The first challenge, the first thematic point emanating from the interviews I've collected is the challenge of finding a new anchor of meaning. Many of the athletes have for years invested their lives in achieving that dream, which hasn't materialized, and they have to abandon it. Finding a new anchor of meaning, a new frame of reference on which their lives is to be rebuilt is one challenge. Many still struggle to find a direction. Another is livelihood struggles. The second theme from my preliminary findings is livelihood struggles. Many of them still struggle to make ends meet, even in their late 20s and in their 30s. So many of them still struggle to make a living or find a new source of income, having invested so many years into a skill that they cannot transfer to any other activity or with limited transfer to other activities. The third challenge is living with injury. It's a very significant term that emerged. In fact, I had one of the athletes who suffered an injury to the eye, or 2 athletes who suffered very serious injuries to the eye. and they are still living with it. One had the injury in 2009. It was only last year that it became a very serious issue, and he's been struggling. And the other has suffered quite significant loss in vision. Then the fourth thematic point emanating is also dealing with disappointment. It's a very serious experience. I also found out from the narratives in the interviews, almost expressed by all the athletes I interviewed. And in one particular case, also, it was very clear because he complained that he finds it difficult today to watch football because it evokes at each moment very strong memories, very strong feelings of disappointment. Then how the other thematic, superordinate thematic area is recovery and restoration. How do they try to restore coherence to their disrupted narrative, biographical narrative? First of all, I found out that it's a very lonely walk. And in many situations, there's little to no support from the academies or clubs. It's almost a journey that each athlete has had to walk and discover alone. So there is little support coming from institutional support, whether from clubs, academies, or from football administrators. Then the role of networks developed through football. I also found out that many of the athletes try to find meaning within football after that dream. Some take to football coaching, especially those of them with some form of higher education. Then there was also another athlete who has taken to selling football gears like football jerseys and boots to other athletes. Then again is the role of alternative skills and education. Some of the athletes took, when they were playing, took their time to enroll in diploma programs. And those of them who did so have had it a little better with gaining employment or doing something different. Like, for instance, one or two of them took to football coaching and have been able to join academies where they are employed as coaches. And they both had a diploma level education. And the other also is someone who has had to go back to a skill he gained as a kid, working under the father's tailoring shop. And today he owns a tailoring shop. Then again, the fourth thematic point is finding satisfaction in achievement. It was quite an interesting one for me. I found out that for some of the athletes, they also try to make sense of the years they spent in football. And one expressed pride and little regrets, because he said that today he's a very well-known person in his community where he played at amateur level, and everybody knows him. And it wouldn't have been possible without him without his journey in football. So he feels that it actually shows some form of social prestige that emanates from being within the football circles, even at the very low level. Further work I have to do on this is interviews with stakeholders on policy interventions, and I plan some field work towards the end of the year. Thank you for listening, and that's my presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And our final third speaker, Zakiro.
It attracts women, absolutely, but it attracts disloyal women.
What decision, Caleb? What decision, Caleb?
Nigeria. So can you go to the second slide, please? Okay, thank you. So what I try to do in this paper is to try to understand why kids and parents in Nigeria are encouraging one another to attend sports academies. And of course, what is the goal of attending sport academies? What are the motivations driving this goal for attending sport academies? So I tried, the first part looks at the introduction, and of course, try to discuss a body of work that is in existence in terms of studies on the sport academies, and I tried to look at how Debbie Nautel have defined what sport academy is, and of course, the outcome of sport academy as discussed by Debbie and his colleague. And of course, I also look at new perspective about sport academies as to a tool for social change in terms of empowerment, gender inclusion, peacemaking and peace building, and of course, the idea of social capital. And of course, I also look at sport academy from dreams perspective, how youth, particularly in Nigeria, are now dreaming of becoming a celebrity as a superstar in the field of sports, and of course, most especially football, which is the most predominant popular sport in Africa, and of course, in Nigeria. Let's go to the next slide. So my case study is Sheikh Modegbami International College and Sport Academy, Soka. So Soka is located in Wasimi in Ogun State, and of course it is established in 2007 by Chief Shegun Odegbami. So Chief Shegun Odegbami was a former Nigerian player who played for Nigerian Super Eagles. And of course, one of the prominent club sides in Nigeria at the time, now Shooting Star. So he was a player between 1970 and 1984 when he eventually hung his boots. So one thing that is special about Chief Shegun Odegbami is the fact that being a second generation of Nigerian international players, so he was one of the very few who combined education with sports. So yeah, from his biography, he opined that he was in love with sports, particularly football, from the very while he was a child in primary school and of course in secondary school. Despite the fact that there were backlash with his parents in terms of football taking a lot of his attention from education, his parents were more of being educated individual, and of course want to ensure that Sheikh Modegbami is educated, and of course given the social milieu and the importance associated with education at the time, that it is only education that can provide you with social mobility, can earn you a job, and of course a sustainable future. But when he became a student of Polytechnic at Ibadan in 1970, when he moved from the north to the south, so through his interest in football, so he became a very prominent footballer in Ibadan. And of course, he was he became a member of Shooting Star in Ibadan. And of course, in 1973, he also participated in the maiden edition of National Sports Festival, representing Oyo State at the time. And of course, it was at that very point in time that Segun Odegbami became a superstar when he was selected as a new member of the Super Eagles that will go ahead to win the first Nations Cup for Nigeria. And of course, he was the captain of the Nigerian team that won the first Nations Cup for Nigeria in 1984. So, given the sound education that Segun Odegbami received, he was also in love with literary writing. So, and of course, by 1979, he had started trying his hands in sports journalism, writing about sport, and of course, issues as relates to sports. So, and when in 1984 he ended his football career, the opportunity that he had as prospective sport journalist, he leveraged upon it, and of course, he became a very prominent sports journalist. And of course, from there, he also moved into sport administration, consultancy, and all that. So, in 2007, it has been an idea of Chief Segun Odegbami to promote education and sport, simply because he has benefited from both. While he benefited as a football star, he also benefited as an educated elite. So for him, he believed that education and sports play hand in hand. You can't separate education from sport. And of course, scholars have looked at the globalization of sport, particularly from the 1970s and of course in the 1980s, when most European teams began to attract African players to abroad. For instance, in following his completion of National Higher Diploma in 1973, he had the opportunity to travel abroad to become a superstar abroad and play football, but he decided to stay back because he felt that while he's at home, he can promote football within Africa rather than going outside. And of course, had the opportunity to study within Nigeria and also promote the Nigerian identity. So he stayed back. So for long, it has been his idea to promote sports and education. So, but this idea came to fruition in 2007 when he established, Segun, can you go back to the next slide before? Still there. So when he established SOCA, so SOCA in 2007 was established and it was named the International Sports. So it was meant to be a non-charitable organization and a sport academy, although a multi-sport academy that includes football, basketball, lawn tennis, tennis, and of course, track and field events. So Segun Odegbami's idea was that as a non-charitable, as a non-profit sport academy, he's going to attract support from state government across Nigeria to promote an idea of nation building and inclusiveness. But to his disappointment, there was no responses from a number of the state government, except a few support he received from government of the Borno government and of course Delta. So and of course, between 2007 and 2014, he was the sole promoter of his academy, so he financed it personally. But of course, in 2014, he had SOCA had a financial challenge that almost truncated the idea of Chief Segun Odegbami. And of course, we must also understand the fact that Segun Odegbami did not just establish SOCA in 2007. It was also in line with the global development between when the idea of Millennium Development Goal also include how sport can be used as a social tool to transform our society. So Segun Odegbami also leveraged on that opportunity to promote the idea. And of course, it became the very first sport academy that combines Western education with sport. Of course, we have several other sport academies that are focused mainly on football. So of course, so in 2014, in order to ensure that SOCA is stable and of course sustainable, so there was a shift from being a non-profit to for-profit organization. And of course, in 2007 and 2014, so in terms of enrollment, so SOCA focused more on the privileged children by giving them scholarship. But because he couldn't go ahead to continue to support some of these children, there was a shift from being non-profit to for-profit organization. So the idea of shifting from non-profit to profit has a very significant implication on the life cycle of SOCA, because since 2001, in 2014, it used to be senior secondary school alone, just SS1, SS2, and SS3. But the transformation also led to including junior secondary school. So by including junior secondary school, they automatically have a source of enrollment for senior secondary school. And of course, in the idea of for profit also include that students now start to will begin to pay school fee. And of course, as we speak, an average amount that each student pay at SOCA today first time is around almost 400,000 naira. Almost 400,000. I don't know how to put that in dollars so that my listeners can understand that. So almost $400,000, 400,000 naira in Nigerian currency. That's a huge amount of money given the situation of the Nigerian economy, and of course, up to almost $1,000. That's what they pay today. That's what they pay today. And of course, we have 3 terms in an academic cycle. We have first, second, and third term. So for first time, they pay almost $1,000. 961 for second term, they pay around 250,000, and for third time they also pay 250,000 euros. So overall, they are paying almost ₦1 million for an education session. $600 for secondary school since 2014. That has been the trajectory of it. So another implication of that is the fact that it took the academy away from the circle of the less privileged. So those that can only attend the academy today must be averagely okay. Their parents must be able to provide the finance and support their education. So in order to also ensure that they continue with the prior vision of non-profitable organization, they now offer very minute scholarship to talented kids who could play or who is interested in sport, but of course lack education, or parents will not support their education. They now begin to promote the idea of a scholarship, but very fragment of the students. So the larger number of the students are now paid students. So, and that also gives us an interesting dynamics as to how sport academy have been operating over the years. Over the years, it has always been attracting children from the less privileged and, of course, providing them opportunity. Now, today, we have children of an average individual who ordinarily will expect that they focus more in education. But now they are more interested in sport simply because the idea of professionalism and, of course, the fame and the material gains that are associated with football, most especially. So we now have average family who ordinarily will not promote, who encourage their children to go the path of sport professionalism, now also enrolling at SOCA to ensure that their kids also. So can you go to the next slide, please? So I try to look at what are the motives and the outcomes of enrolling kids at Sport Academy. So one of the motives is that education. So for instance, since the institutionalization of a structural adjustment program, Nigeria has struggled in the area of education in terms of dwindling economic resources, and of course, the budgetary allocation for education had not allowed Nigerian education to function well. So, and as a result of that, there is this disillusionment in the area of it, and people do no longer have the belief that education alone is enough to provide them social mobility. So there is a need for them to look for new opportunities, and sport has become a very lucrative opportunity. But despite that, some parents still they are still very much aware that education, whether you are a sport person or not, you still need education because sports life cycle is very short. So if for like 10, 20 years you're able to play to play sport, so what's come after you? Because in Nigeria, we've had series of ex-internationals who are in the long run more or less beggar in terms of sickness and lifestyle. They struggle with life after their professional life. So many parents believe that even after a professional life, you still need a life after. So parents now begin to push their kids, though they do not have interest in education. Parents have interest in education, kids have interest in sport. Now they have an academy that promotes both identity, so they begin to push their art. So another motive is fulfilling parental unmet aspiration. So from the data I get, many parents at that point also had interest in playing football, but due to the nature of their time, they were unable to aspire to become a professional. Now they have children who are interested in becoming a superstar. So parents are also, through their children, they want to achieve their unmet aspiration. So we also have it also a springboard for transnational migration. For instance, in 2011, between 2011 and 2014, soccer had the opportunity to host MTN Football Scholars Program. And that was also a dynamics that affects the life cycle of soccer, because the opportunity that soccer and its children gained at the time, after the expiration of MTN Football Scholars, soccer administration took it over. So between 2011 and 2014, MTN Football Scholar organized a talent hunt to select best talent in Nigeria, and of course, send them to United States in collaboration with some universities in United States, in which they could acquire education and of course play sport for those universities. So when this life cycle of the program ended in 2014, it has opened the soccer administrator to a new direction to secure funding and of course ensure that the soccer continue to lead. So from 2014 to date, soccer has incorporated an idea of transnational scholarship into its program, and it has continued to use that as an advertisement agenda to attract students. So one of the outcomes is social mobility. So Abdul Oganda was one of the beneficiaries of MTN Football Scholar. So he transited to the United States, and of course, in the United States, he couldn't play football. He was injured, but of course, fortunately he studied economics, and today he runs 3 football companies. One of it is AUSS, which is just an idea of also promoting sports diplomacy between United States universities and of course Nigeria. So and afterlife and dreams are met. So I also discovered that many of the students that have attended soccer, not all of them were able to gain scholarship abroad and of course progress as they've one of them is one King Lusheba. So while I was on field, he returned after he has graduated, and in my conversation he regretted the fact that he's not been able to progress as he had envisioned. And of course, there is after school program. I also discovered that since the MTN Football Scholar Program, so the school had also leveraged on the opportunity of the transnational and of course created a sort of another program to attract new but graduated students outside of the soccer, and of course also promise to ensure that they transit to abroad and of course achieve their professional dream. Next slide, please.
Yeah, really wrap up. Look at that.
So in conclusion, so the shift from non-profit to profit sport academy shows the limits and the challenges of development initiative. It also reveals the limitation of the concept of local participation, which tend to promote inclusiveness and sustainability. This is seen in other governments attempt to leverage on social capital through collaboration and mobilization of the state government to promote soccer. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe I'll come closer So you know, or you guys wanna come over here and then we can all be together? This is fabulous. Okay, can the people at home hear us? Despite our loud neighbors?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much for 3 fantastic papers. I mean, I'm just the chair, not to discuss it, but I would like to maybe take the liberty, not to discuss, but just to say that they really were 3 excellent, amazing papers. And it keeps going in my head, you know, I'm wondering like, I mean, you know, some of the times I feel like, why aren't people paying more attention to sports? And like I look in the room and I think, okay, we don't have a big audience so much, and it feels like, you know, why aren't people thinking enough about sports, taking enough academic attention to sports? And it just feels so incredibly important and relevant. And I just thought about all 3 of your presentations. It would have been so helpful if right from the start you could have given us like some statistics or like some numbers, like some hard numbers we can understand. How many kids are we talking about? How much money are parents investing? How much money is is the actual potential for the Africa NBA to make, you know? Like, I mean, it's not just an economic question, but also socially. Like if you're talking about an academy of soca, how many kids are registered there? And did you actually say that it's the parents have to pay 400,000 per kid? The parents have to pay? It's shocking. That's a statistic. If we had a lot more, if we knew how many parents are paying that, you know, that is an insane amount of money, I thought, you know. So it's just like more statistics like that, just a little more would give us a little more. It would make a better case for why economically, socially, culturally, why sports is so relevant and matters so much. So that's just something I wanted to, you know, put out there. But anyway, I don't know if anybody, do we have any people in the audience or any questions?
It's me, I didn't know who's journey on my behalf. Let's find out.
Yes, who's question, Sakiro? The other Sakiro? Oh, anyway, I don't know, so maybe,
I have a question for
yeah, go ahead, Itamar, yeah.
So from Shuko, for example, I really enjoyed listening to your talk. I was wondering whether you heard from the former players, whether before the retirement, whether the clubs had any seminars for post-career engagement, whether they were in whether clubs in Germany or wherever you interview those players, whether there was a growing awareness of the precarity after retirement, that many of them might be experiencing depression and all those negative aspects after one finishes their career and does not find satisfaction. So that's my main question, whether football teams know how to handle the already like before the retirement, the day after they retire.
Are you talking about professional football teams?
Yeah.
Okay, so as opposed to kids football academy.
Yes, exactly.
So did you hear the question? I'm sorry, it seems like you're like straining to hear. Were you able to hear him?
Yeah. Instances, the network wasn't so strong, so it came broken somehow.
Yeah, so
I
I'll
didn't
tell you,
really
so,
understand
okay,
all
so
of
I'll
it.
tell you what Itamar was asking if in your experience, you know of professional football clubs that that they know how to contend with, that they know how to deal with, that they're actually preparing players for retirement. In your experience and from your research and knowledge, do you know if professional clubs
Or even academies.
or even academies, actually, that's an interesting question. If you know, are we expecting something from football academies with youth that professional clubs aren't doing either? right? Like our professional academies or football academies, professional clubs or professional academies, are either of them actually preparing players for the day after?
Okay, thank you. If you recall within my presentation on the issue of recovery and restoration, I did mention about the first thing that is a lonely walk. There's absolutely little support from many football clubs, because some of those I also interviewed played at the non-professional level of the football league. And it's quite very clear that within the administrative procedures of most of the academies and even football clubs, there's absolutely no imagination of post-career at that point of deselection. In fact, it also emanates from the process of deselection itself. A lot of the players are either on contracts that are one-year contracts or even pay as you play, and are not even recognized as full players of these clubs. So they do not really have that within their procedures any place for preparing players beyond that very contractual involvement with or period where they are either in the academies or they are contracted with the clubs. So it's completely a lonely walk in most instances.
And has any academic research been done on professional football players after they finish their careers? Because I'm wondering if it's even something that has been done on professional players.
Yeah, there are a few. Oh, sorry. There are.
Yeah, if it has, wouldn't that be a good comparison to draw between the football academies and professional players?
Yes, a few papers I've seen even at academy level, especially in the developed world, there is some level of support given to deselected athletes, even at academy levels, where there's a preparation towards their exit if they are to be released, psychosocial support, and in some cases, helping them to enroll into an alternative career path. Though there are also criticisms about what happens in football leagues like the Premier League and or the English Football League, and also in the bigger leagues. But to some degree, they make such provisions for players, though still criticized as insufficient.
Okay. So I don't know, Sakira, with that number, and all the sports, like the table tennis parents also pay 400,000?
Yes, because I was also baffled when I learned that they are paying that huge amount of money. So, but what I also discovered is that Ogun State is very close to Lagos, so he enjoys the ambience of Lagos, and of course, in fact, it's one of the states in Nigeria that have one of the highest paying secondary schools. Because I later find out that there is another school within the state where they pay close to 1.5 million naira per session, per term. So there is this ambassador grammar school in the states where they pay 1.5 million naira per term in the secondary school. And in fact, some of the parents works there. So, and in my interview with the parent who work at Ambassador, he says that the reason why he can afford to send his child to Soka Academy is the fact that where he works, he earns well. And of course, he wants to support his kid to achieve something in life. So they do pay it.
Shocking.
Well, really one another dynamic is the fact that they are allowed to pay instrumentally. So
Until they die.
instrumentally such that for first term, so you can pay on a roll of 3 times so that it will not burden parents. But of course, at the end of the day, you still have to pay before the end of the term. So, and of course, because maybe another thing is the fact that it's a boarding school, residential. So the academy provides accommodation and of course medical as well as food. So and these are all included, and of course sporting activities. So these are all included in the fee, not just for education.
Okay. I also got the question of secure. In my feedback, so I saw in a Unistar, for example, there were some really excellent footballers that the academy founder gave them scholarship because they were so good, and he identified the potential of later on selling the rights and making money on them. So I was wondering whether the very professional kid or boy, girl, and can earn like a scholarship, and they won't need to pay because maybe segment will realize that they can make a lot of money from that.
Exactly. So like I said, since it transited to for-profit sports academy, they offer very minute scholarship to talented kids. But these are kids who, at the end of their graduation from the secondary school, will still require some form of support to progress into a professional life. So, I mean, there is little reward on some of these talented kids that were given scholarship, because at the end of the day, when they graduate from the school, they will still require some form of support to progress to the next stage of their career development. So one other dynamic that I also noticed is the fact that since the idea of a transnational migration came in, so it's not, they were focusing more on their children, because I trained with some of the kids, and despite the fact that it's been long that I play football, I know that I'm better than some of the kids that they are.
That's really bad.
I know that I'm better than some of the kids that they are. And of course, in my interaction with Chief Sheikh Modegbami, he made reference to a few years ago when he tried to introduce two of the graduates of Soka to national and the cadet selection in Abuja. So, and they got to Abuja, he wanted to use the social capital to ensure that those kids were selected to represent Nigeria at the cadet level. So when he got to Abuja, so those kids were allowed to train with some of those that have come for trial, but they found out that barely 30 minutes on the field, those children could not muster the courage to carry on. So, and they now consider that despite the fact that they're giving them some form of training at soccer, they will still require at least 2-3 years of another professional training before they could claim that they can aspire to become a professional sports person.
I'm sorry, I really don't understand. People are paying all this money for the football and then they can't play even? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's the reality of ground. Aside the fact that the very first set, those that benefited from the idea of charity that when the academy started, like I mentioned, Said Abdullah, and of course we have a number of them that are currently playing abroad. So one is Ejara, who is playing in an Australian league. So, but not as the statistics shows that there are very minute of graduate of soccer that have succeeded in promoting to a professional football life.
Okay, that's I don't think it will be peculiar to soccer. Even the big football institutions and clubs, they have a very the percentage of those that actually go professional is still quite low, and but the particular interest or question I would have is, in terms of finding alternative life pathways after deselection or after soccer, what's the trajectory of those who do not make it on the football or sports pathway?
I mean, I want to ask you though, you're saying that it's not unusual what you're hearing, and I agree. Everything I know and everything I've learned from all of you is that most people don't make it, but most people don't pay 400,000 naira to go to a football academy. It's a big difference, right?
Yeah, it is.
So that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what I find incredible, that's a lot of, just one term
Yeah, so-
400,000 per term.
it could the dynamics or the perception could change if soccer is analyzed or seen as a regular school, but with a sporting component or a larger sporting component than usual. So if those students who pass through soccer, who do not make it on the sports pathway, are still able to continue on the other pathway that those who go to regular secondary schools do, then the dynamics might be different because the fees aren't really different from what many private regular secondary schools might pay. So I would argue that it becomes a question of, for those who do not make it on the football pathway, are they able to use the education they receive from soccer, the conventional education they receive, to chart a different course of life, maybe to move in to continue their higher education, or going into an apprenticeship that is enabled by the education they received at soccer? I don't know.
Yeah, from my findings, I realized that the nature of education that the kids receive at soccer also include an aspect of technical education, most especially in the area of art, because one of the courses that one of the subjects they take is fine arts. And of course, when I interacted with the teacher who takes fine arts, I discovered that many of the students have actually performed excellently well in terms of how they've evolved through the years in terms of their knowledge of art. So I was even arguing that had there been at any point in time that the school leverage on this very opportunity by encouraging carrying out an art exhibition that's where they are going to invite some of the parents and of course display some of the artworks of their children, and of course maybe that will encourage the parents to perhaps encourage some of their kids to find an alternative pathway to that line. But the responses was that many of the parents are not interested in ideas like that. So, and of course, like I said, the idea of transnational migration, from what I also understood, is the fact that it goes beyond them traveling abroad to pursue a professional lifestyle. And I also associated that with the proliferation of the advancement of technology. Many of the kids have phone, even though they don't use phone on campus, they have phone at home, and of course they have relatives abroad. And of course, these exchanges with their relatives abroad on the basis of, oh, you work for one, when you work abroad, you will pay per hour. And of course, the crisis that Nigeria had recently in terms of double foreign exchange, that where almost everybody now knows that $1 is exchange for 1,000 naira, and of course they can easily calculate that if you earn $1,000, it translates to millions of naira when you return back home. So many of them are not even aspiring to travel abroad purposefully because they want to become a professional footballer, but of course seeking alternative opportunity if they made it to abroad. So this is another dynamic. So, and of course, the school, one other opportunity that I may say the school offer is in the area of leadership. So annually, the school will invite prominent individuals in Nigeria. For instance, people like former President Olusegun Obasanjo, the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, had been invited to come and speak to the students so that they can also take inspiration from their own life, so that they can aspire, if they pull up further as a sport person, they can also aspire to another professional life.
Okay, time's up, but there is another Sakira with a hand raised. We don't know who this person is. since we think we're sitting next to Sekiru, but whoever it is, we're happy to hear you. So just you can ask a question now, and then we have to wrap it up because it's lunchtime soon here in Lagos.
So can I quickly ask Itamar this?
Oh, it was you? Oh,
Yeah, not.
Yeah, I would also like to comment on Itamar's.
yeah, go ahead.
So
Okay.
I would just want to find out that how inclusive is the NBA as a diplomatic tool to Pan-African agenda?
Wow, that's a good question, Sekiru. I'm not sure I'm happy with this question.
Why? Why do you want to have a question?
No, I don't want to answer. No, I'm kidding. No, it's a good question because the NBA are doing a lot of initiatives throughout the continent. And it seems like the Pan-African League is a Pan-African initiative, and they're speaking about it as a Pan-African initiative because they're bringing issues from Egypt, from Morocco, Tunisia, Angola, Mozambique, South Africa, Nigeria in one team. So they are branding it as a Pan-African initiative. And also they're attaching the academy to this Pan-African initiative because in two ways. First, by including by accepting into this academy females and males from all over Africa, and with particular attention to West Africa, but mostly rhetorically from all Africa, and also in the league of so I think 2 or 3 each team has the right or must accept 2 or 3 graduates from the academy or 3 participants in the academy in each team. Meaning if you have like 10 teams in the league, so each team must have at least 2 players from the academy, and that's that way because the academy does not have a team. The academy has a team that plays in Dakar in Senegal, but it doesn't compete as a team in the league. So 2 players from each from the academy goes to each team, and so that sends a Pan-African message. Whether indeed it's realized or not, maybe okay, I can speak about later. It's a good question.
So you can go ahead.
Did you have a question?
Okay. US China competition in Africa has been quite intense. It seems that US, the move they're making on the African continent is all about countering China. And I would also like to know if you've observed any kind of counter moves by China in terms of sports diplomacy as a result of US activities as well.
So I think, maybe we can frame the Chinese construction of football stadiums as one way. Actually, it started before. Yes, I think it's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I can go in this place. Okay. So, the Chinese, I think the construction of stadiums can be considered as a way of Chinese stadium diplomacy or sports diplomacy by constructing stadiums with their own expense or giving massive loans to African countries. And also, we can see in Uganda, for example, the sponsorship of teams that enables the construction and the upgrade of football stadiums. So maybe through the stadiums, we can consider some aspects of sports diplomacy from China, and maybe the American NBA consider as a response to the Chinese stadium diplomacy.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much to everyone. Really fantastic panel. It was fantastic. I learned a lot. It was totally fascinating. Each of the papers were excellent. Thank you guys so much. It was, I look forward to more collaborations between the 3 of you and more scholars engaging in this really, really important field.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed listening to the other panelists, and I hope it will also give us the opportunity to collaborate more. Thank you.
For sure. Okay, thanks. Take care.
Yeah,
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, we do need to take our picture because we don't have one good picture from all those pictures that were taken by